Welcome back to the Great Late Reviews series where a random guy on the internet plays the game long after the release. It can be months or even years, but one thing you can be sure of, I will always be late to the party. In this episode, we're gonna take a look on something that is more niche than your standard AAA title. Elex II, created by German studio Pirahnha Bytes, known from making the same game for over 2 decades. Yes, it was early 2001 when premiered the first Gothic game, and let me tell you that not much has changed during all that time. Gothic, Risen and Elex series, despite all having different world settings and characters, they have very similar structure and gameplay feel. While the fans around the world loved first 2 Gothic games, after that, reception of future titles was not always as good. I wonder why Pirahnha never deviated from their old scheme started back in 1996. They just tried to recapture the magic of their first game for all this time, or did they just want to tell different stories using almost the same tools? These are not the questions we are trying to answer today, not at all. What we need is a closer look at the sequel to Elex. Is it worth buying and playing? Let's find out right about now. One man, one desire. This season Jax is one confused man, hated by almost everyone. But let me start from the beginning. The story continues years after the ending of the first game. For some reason Jax decided to become a hermit instead of working to the benefit of Magellan communities, helping people all over the place, like he used to. To make things even worse, he abandoned his son and the kid's mother, that turned out to be Kaya. Wait a second, I hear you say, but I chose to romance Nasty in the last game. Well, dear viewer, your choices from the first Elex don't matter. From what I gather, the canon story of the previous game was decided based upon choices that majority of players made. That's all fine. I didn't expect a Mass Effect level of choice relevancy in this niche title, but still it felt out of place from time to time. Why did we even had so many choices in the first game to start with? Who knows? Speaking of the ladies, Kaya is totally different woman this time around. Having a child with Jax was not good for her mental health, I guess. On the other hand, Nasty is even more nasty, if you can believe that. Both ladies are hateful towards each other. And if that's not enough, we got 4th element to this love triangle. The Elb lady, whose name I can never remember. This whole romance thing got way out of control. Funny thing, most people hate Jax, despite the fact he helped so many of them just a few years back. I understand that some folks can get resentful when you walk off to the wilderness, just to come back after several years, because some aliens destroyed your cabin in the woods. Yeah, sure, but almost all of them? Many more things here don't make any logical sense. Too often what characters are saying doesn't add up. Sentences out of order with no cohesive connection. Billy Idol's concert in-game is out of place, just what the hell. It's really bad, even for Pirahnha Bytes game. I blame the writing, that is the weakest from all of the titles from this German studio. Long gone are the glory days of Gothic 1 and 2. Don't get me wrong, they were not masterpieces as well, but they were head and shoulders above Elex II in this department. To multiply the roughness of the dialogue, voice acting is not very good. It was never great in any of the Pirahnha games, but here I feel it tenfold. I still need to play Risen 3. So I'm gonna check that out when I get to it, but who knows when that will be. So the action this time takes place in regions east of Tava, Previously it was west of this fort. That's good, I say, new places to explore. And that's what I like the most in these open world games. Another thing that boggles my mind. People in this game were closer to modern day than in Elex I, which doesn't make any logical sense again. No clothes factories were opened from what I can tell. On the other hand, I know why Baxter lost control over Tavar years back to the not-so-bright twins. He is an idiot himself. I was really disappointed to talk to him in the crater, which is new base of operations for outlaws. If he is still alive in Elex II, acting like this, I will be shocked. Fortunately, we got an uplifting and funny side story. Two berserkers trying to find new home after misadventures. I really enjoy listening to them, and no, I haven't forgot. The main plot is tied directly to the ending of the first game. The aliens came to conquer and transform Magellan with their Dark Elex mumbo jumbo. It's really not that interesting. Well, it had potential closing in to the end of the campaign, when you get to know who Skyans really are, and what are their goals. But it all fell flat on its face in the end. I will spare myself and you, dear viewer, the suffering of unraveling this disaster of the main story, where Jax is talking in alien tongues and having blackouts like raging alcoholic. He got bitten by alien dog, so he is now infected. So you will have to endure these weakly made, out of control moments. Mortal threads in the story were never a strong side of Piranha Games' writing. But this time around it doesn't even convey the feeling of impending doom. The alien threat is just there, walking around, just like that. It took me over 60 hours to finish this game, and for my taste it was well overstaying its welcome. But how it plays, I hear you ask. Let's start with combat, which is a little clunky as always when it comes to Pirahnha Bytes games. It's somewhat improved from Elex I. Thankfully, Dev's abandoned system where your damage was pitiful at the start of a combo and reached its normal values after several hits. It was really annoying. We got better animations and responsiveness of controls, which smooths it all out. When it comes to game difficulties, they are even more messed up than in previous game. Only the easiest one provides no stamina cost to many of your actions, which was a separate setting in the past. Well, if you don't wanna face roll everything on your way through Magellan, you better invest some of those learning points in stamina training. Speaking of which, we got the same system as before, when it comes to upgrading Jax himself. You got your learning points for skills and attribute points for, well, attributes. What did you expect me to say? The only worth mentioning improvement is that you don't need to store all those stat boosters potions to the late game. This time around we got our attributes divided to base and bonus ones, of which only the former increases the cost of adding more points to them. But what would be stats without the gear we use in our adventures? We got nice spectrum of melee and ranged weapons, and they can be upgraded using copies of lesser ones to make more powerful versions. This is a nice addition that involves crafting to be more useful for gaining power or just making more money. Money? How? I hear you ask. Well, that's simple enough. The upgraded version sells to vendors at higher price than some of its parts. I like that. But be careful to not waste precious resources to raise the amount of elixir shards you get from sales. Keep them to upgrade the items you're gonna use. Compared to Elex I, we got more accessible choices of weapons and armor at the early game, which is nice, I must say. We even got a new armor set. For people who wanna stay factionless, it has slightly lower stats than its faction counterparts, but I appreciate having a choice. I have no idea if you can beat the game factionless, how it was promised by developers before the game was released, but I would hope you could. Anyhow, this time around legendary weapons are not useless. More than that, some of them are best in the category. This is how it should be. And speaking of how things should be, the new map is great. It shares the areas to the west with previous one, but most of what we got here is new terrain, ready to explore and uncover. We got even more verticality of the map, which is good, cause we got improved jetpack to help us get wherever we want. By the way, first time you get to the base of every faction, you get a tour around the location, which provides additional story and gameplay elements. I really like it. Makes it all feel more like real places, and not just some game assets. You're gonna travel outside of those faction entrenchments, and travel a lot. I was surprised to learn that night is really dark, and it's not a good idea at all to go into the wilderness during late hours. It's realistic that way, cause the better idea is just to go to sleep, get a good night rest, and come back on the trail at sunrise. During our adventures and general wandering, we can choose to have companions with us. Don't be shocked to find out that at early stages of a game, they are almost useless. Low HP gets them to fall down on the ground only after a few minor slaps. Thankfully, later on, they get more tanky and can deal pretty decent damage. That is nicely balanced counter to Lone Wolf playthrough. Another good thing about your companions is that they have unique bonus dialogues when you interact with other NPCs. It feels really good and reminds me of classic computer RPGs. You can even listen to longer dialogues without your direct participation. You can be just a bystander and observe that you are not the only character with agendas around here. But all this striving for realism got its uglier side. Mainly, we got too many come back later set to us by NPCs. This gets really annoying as time goes on. You can choose to do something else meanwhile, which I did. But when you got nothing else to do at the moment, your only option is to find a bed and sleep it out. If we are already at the annoyances, let me tell you this. Some of the enemies got ridiculous amounts of health points. On higher difficulty levels, it's getting insane to the point that I got to the conclusion that since I already defeat enemies with ease, I can just turn down difficulty setting to shorten the fights. Don't get me wrong, game is hard at the beginning, but as Jax is regaining his strength, it gets a lot easier. When it comes to enemies variety, it's decent. We got some new ones and the whole menagerie of the old foes. I honestly thought that I killed all trolls in the first game. Well, I guess I missed a cave or two. Besides, I chose to help berserkers back then, so it could have something to do with those flourishing war trees. Damn mana fiends. One thing that adds to the prolonging of the fighting. At the end game, you literally combat whole hordes of enemies. Big fight after big fight, it really seemed like it would never end. Thankfully it did. My old man's hands were on the brink of malfunctioning. Oh, where are those lost young years when I could last from sunrise to sunset? Your companions don't make it easy on you at the later stages of the game either. Them bastards spam you with follower quests left, right and center. You can't take one step in your own base of operations, namely Bastion, without one of them just running to you and crying to help them out once again. These companion quests are not even that interesting this time. I like them more in previous title. It is what it is, I guess. Oh man, oh boy. 5 years between two games. Plenty of changes in technical aspect, let me tell you that. First of all, what we can see right away, we got ourselves a new graphics and revised engine. Game world looks more realistic, but it loses stylized look from the first Elex. I'm not a fan of those changes. I think it's for the worse as time goes on. Well, at least we get good lighting and shadows. Geometry and level of details in the distance is greatly improved as well, but it all comes at the cost. Performance is not very good this time. Especially in settlements, frames per second can decrease to nearly unplayable levels. Lowering settings don't help much, unfortunately. It's only around 15% difference in performance between highest and lowest settings on my PC, which is Ryzen 5800X3D and RTX 3070. Utilization of PC resources could be a lot better as well. For that you can check one of my previous videos, testing performance of a game. Even with some great visual detailing for characters and locations, we can't have a Pirahnha Bytes game without some terrors, right? Some faces look really wonky and uncanny, while some others in contrast look almost excellent. I have a strong suspicion that two different people were working on that, and one was way more talented than the other. By the way, some of the characters in the game look too similar for my liking. Example, Kaya and Thorhild could be mistaken for twins. I can forgive unimportant NPCs looking alike, it's the standard in video games, but very important personas that you spend a lot of time talking to, that I simply cannot overlook. Another thing that breaks immersion in an unapologetic way, it's bugging out of NPC pathing sometimes. They get all jittery with animations and sounds. What a horror show. To add to all of that, most of the clothing and armor look too different from the original game. It haven't been that many years, so the typical visual uplift in this department when it comes to RPG sequels doesn't work as good as in other titles. Emotes in cutscenes sucks, both animations and sound of them. Synchronization is just not there, and where devs were going for more theatrical feeling, they fall flat again, and it all feels like a bad machinima parody. Interface is nothing much to talk about. New quest log and map are even worse than in previous title. I don't know how they managed to do that, but they have. When it comes to music, we got a mix of tracks from the old game and some new ones added. Overall, I have a feeling that it's slightly worse in sequel, but that's just the feeling I have. Nice surprise was the intro to the game, which is the best in Pirahnha Bytes history. It's pre-rendered and on a good cinematic level. I enjoyed it really. But the stark contrast by the worst ending I have ever seen in my life leaves the bitter taste in my mouth after I finish the game. It's a literal slideshow, like in Fallout 1 back in 1997. But even worse if you can believe it. In Fallout it made sense for the time it released, and it was made with care and attention to detail. In Elex II, half of it we already seen and read during loading screens, and if that's not enough, the music cuts off in the middle of this slideshow. It's a real disaster and it should be fixed to avoid further reputation tarnishing by piranhas. What a disaster. Listen guys, I know you would like a clear recommendation at the end of this video, but that's simply not possible. I have many warm feelings and nostalgic memories tied to Pirahnha Bytes games, but at the same time I'm not blind to all the glaring failures of their newest title. Elex II is in plans, and the ending of the second one suggested as well. I can recommend this game only if you are a live-sworn fan of Pirahnha Bytes games, or simply an RPG lover that played all the good titles already. If none of the condition mentioned is true, I strongly suggest to play another game, or to do almost anything else with your time and money. It saddens me that it came to this, but something is just lacking here. Some magical element that makes games fun and enjoyable. Almost nothing works here as it should. Well, I wish the German studio all the best for the future, but Elex II is a stain on their portfolio. That's all I've got for you today. I will haunt you next time in another great late review.